Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. We're going to continue this morning hearing evidence from Claire Williams of the TMO. So would you ask Miss Williams to come in, please? Good morning, Miss Williams.
Good morning. Good morning.
Are you ready to carry on?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Miss Williams. I just want to sweep up a few topics that we covered yesterday and just tie off a few loose ends, if I may. The first of those is your reading of the Stage D report, which was dated December 2012. Can we look at the Stage D report, which is MAX 50757? You can see that it's dated August 2013. In fact, not December 2012. I'm slightly preempting my own question, but you I think, referred yesterday to a report dated to December 2012. Do you remember what that might have been?
No, it was this Stage D report, the Exova report, I said was dated to December 2012.
Okay, so looking at the first page of this document, the Stage D report, which we can see was dated August 2013, do you remember whether you read this when you arrived at the TMO a month later?
Yes, this was on my desk.
It was on your desk?
It was given to me as part of my briefing.
When you say it was given to you, was the whole thing given to you as a package? As part of your briefing?
There was a bound report, which I believe was this, which was on my desk, left for me to read as a briefing.
I see. Can we go to page 78 in it then, please? This was within the bound report, and this is issue 1 of Exova's outline fire safety strategy for Grenfell Tower, and you can see the date at the bottom right-hand corner on the first page there, 31st of October 2012.
Yes.
When you looked at the Stage D report, did you look at this document?
I was aware that it was in there, yes.
Well, you were aware that it was in there because you read it, or you were aware that it was in there because somebody told you that it was in there?
I believe I saw it and I would have scanned it.
Right. When you say scanned it, do you mean read it quickly?
Yes.
Can we go in this report to page 9 internally, which I think should be page 73 in the printout. That's not what I want. Did you, if we can just go back to page 5 internally, page 9 internally of this document. Let's try page 87.
Well, do you want 9? Because we've now got 9 up, I think.
No. Well, let me try and take it more quickly. Do you remember seeing a paragraph in this report dealing with external fire spread?
No.
You don't?
No.
Did you read this Stage D report fully, do you think?
I would have concentrated on the architectural background, that the initial paragraph, pages from Studio E, that was the area that I concentrated on most of, but I would have scanned the rest of it.
I see, you would have scanned the rest of it. Can we look at page 81 in the relativity numbering? And just look at paragraph 3.1.4, please. Compliance with B4 external fire spread. It is considered that the proposed changes will have no adverse effect on the building in relation to external fire spread, but this will be confirmed by an analysis in a future issue of this report. When you scanned this document, did you see that?
No.
Can you account for that?
As I say, I scanned it. It had been in existence for a little while, the August 13 Stage D report, so I scanned this, but I do not remember seeing that paragraph at all.
Okay. So does that tell us that your review of the Stage D report was cursory?
When it was given to me initially, yes, I concentrated on the background as presented by the architects, and it was a big document, so I tried to use my time by say, understanding their background. So this bit was cursory, yes.
Right. Did you have a discussion or briefing session with anybody within the TMO about the Stage D report?
No,
Did you have a discussion with anybody outside the TMO, such as Studio E, about the Stage D report that they had produced?
no, I was aware that it was in existence and several people had referred it to me as part of my getting to grips with the project.
Even though, well, who were the several people who had referred it to you as part of your getting to grips with the project? Do you remember?
David Gibson would have, because it was part of my briefing pack. Studio E would have said, have you read our report? Because that will explain to you where we are at the moment. So probably those two parties specifically.
Right. When Studio E would have said, have you read our report? What did you answer?
It would have been a conversation with Bruce Souness, and I would have introduced myself, discussed our backgrounds, and then I would have said, I'm getting up to date, and he would have said, well, the latest information is the Stage D report.
Right.
So I don't remember a timescale, but I would suspect fairly early on when I met him.
Right. Having been told by Studio E to read the Stage D report in order to get to grips with the project, why didn't you read it thoroughly?
I was being inducted into the new organisation. I had a lot of information to read. I was still being taken around the offices to meet people who I would need to work with. So it was an overload of new information. So I had to balance what I was doing. So obviously at different times, different things got priority. But it was because I was new to the organisation that I had a lot to get to grips with.
In your career to that date, had you ever come across fire safety strategies?
No.
So this was the first time you'd ever seen one, is that right?
Yes, I think it is. I've worked on new builds, but I'm not aware of seeing a fire safety strategy with them. I can't say hand on heart I've seen it.
So when you noticed Exover's outline fire safety strategy, as we can see here on the screen in the pack, this was the first time you'd ever seen such a document of its kind?
I believe so, yes.
Given that it was the first time you'd ever seen such a document of its kind, why didn't you read it thoroughly and acquaint yourself with exactly what it said?
Yeah, no, I at the time was new to the organisation and I had many issues to deal with in terms of being inducted, in terms of what my role was, and so I was also getting to grips with the project. So I didn't read this paragraph in the detail that I should have.
Given that it was a fire safety strategy, did it not strike you as something to do with life safety?
Later in the project, perhaps I would have thought about that, but when I first arrived, it was one of many documents I had to get to grips with and had to understand as a whole. So it was part of the jigsaw, yes.
Right. Given the importance that you accorded to this document when you read it, was there any part of the Stage D report that you accorded greater importance or regarded as a higher priority?
I believe, as I've said, that I would have read the background to the scheme as put forward by Studio E with into more depth, because it gave a background into how the project was put together and how the design proposal had been arrived at. So I would have looked at the architectural elements first, because that was something I thought gave me a good briefing, as well as something that perhaps was more familiar to me.
I see. Now, turning to a slightly different topic, or rather different topic, we discussed yesterday the meeting at which you said that Simon Lawrence had given an assurance that the cladding was inert and wouldn't burn. And I put to you, I think on 2 occasions, why your reaction when you saw the building on fire on the 14th of June wasn't that you had been told something which was wrong. Do you remember that exchange we had, I think, on 2 occasions yesterday? I just want to show you a document, TMO 0087056, please. No, that's not a document that's in Opus's immediate grasp, and we may have to come back to that later on then. Can I then ask you some questions about the discussions we had yesterday about the fire risk assessment? And can I start by showing you what you said at day 55, line 116? And line 40, day 55, page 116, at line 14. And at line 14, you say, or I say to you, we've got to look at the next FRA, is that right? And you say, yes, that's where I'm expecting that there would be feedback, yes. And this was in the context of me asking you some questions about you recording the answers to the questions that you'd posed to Simon O'Connor, which had arisen out of the 17th of October 2014 FRA. Do you remember?
Yes.
That's the context of it.
Yes.
I don't want to take up time reading great chunks of transcript, but that's the context. So you said at line 15, that's where I'm expecting that there would be the feedback. Let's look at that. It's CST 403161. And if we can go to page 4 in that, and this is the 26th of April 2016 FRA done by Carl Stokes. If we look at page 4, you can see that at the very top of the page, new external cladding has been fitted to this building as part of the project. Do you see that?
Yes.
As part of the project of refurbishment stroke construction work being undertaken on and within this building. The original external face of this building has been overclad. The new fire-rated cladding is fixed to the outface of the building by metal fixings, and the whole process has been overseen by the RBKC Building Control Department and officers. They have approved and accepted the fixing system and cladding used. Now, that statement there is repeated verbatim in the next FRA in June 2016, and just to be comprehensive, let's go to that. CST 403145, please. And again at page 4, that's the first page. You can see 20th of June 2016. And this is, I believe, the last fire risk assessment before the fire itself, the following June. And if we go to page 4, again, you can see at the top of the page, Ms. Williams, new external cladding has been fitted to this building as part of the project, etc. And in the third line it says, the new fire-rated cladding is fixed to the outface of the building by metal fixings. We don't see an answer to the question of what the fire rating is there. Did Mr. O'Connor ever tell you?
No, I don't think he responded to the queries over how to deal with it. I think, as I said yesterday, we ended up just sitting down together.
Right. Do you know where Mr. Stokes got the information that the cladding was fire-rated? I
don't know whether he got it from conversations that were had with Ryden, or I don't know, no.
You see, you told us yesterday that in order to see the answers to the questions in the 5-part email, which contained, you said, a lot of bits you were sweeping up, which you sent to Simon O'Connor, we would have to look at the next FRA.
Yeah.
And indeed, we're now looking at the next FRA and the one after that. And this is all that is said here about cladding. Looking at those documents, do you accept that, in fact, you didn't get any responses of any meaning to the questions that you asked Mr. O'Connor, which in turn Mr. Stokes had asked of you?
I believe that Simon O'Connor didn't give any formal written responses, and therefore this is based on the best understanding that Carl Stokes would have had.
Do you know who supplied Mr. Stokes with the statement that the fire rating, the cladding was fire rated?
I'm not sure, I don't know.
Right. Now, can we go to day 55, different subject, which is the Keystone database? Can we go to day 55, yesterday's transcript, please, and go to page 132? And I'd like to go to line 24, if we can, in that, please. And I'm asking you there about an email exchange, which goes over the page, between you, Philip Booth, and Nick Valente. You go over the page to page 133, about your 12th of November 2014 email to them, their response back to you, and then your Lacanal Moment email to Simon Lawrence at Ryden. Do you recall? That's the context.
I remember the context.
Yes, and I asked you about the database, and if you go to page 140, that's where the line starts, but if we go to page 140, please, and go to line 12, I asked you, did you give this database a name or nickname? And at line 12, your answer was, it was Keystone, was the overriding name, I think. And if you go then to the question of fire retardancy, I just want to show you what you said yesterday. Go back a little bit in the transcript to page 137 at line 8. And at line 8, I ask you, you go to the database, it asks for costs, so you know, and look at the cladding. What I want to know is whether what you looked at on the cladding was what promised you to ask about flame retardants, or whether the database asked about flame retardants. Yeah, no, I believe the database had something that would say, is there any issue of flame retardants, or something of that sort about fire, and that's probably what would have done it. But it could have been that I put in cladding and then I thought, oh, hold on, I haven't asked them this, so it could have been either. I can't 100% guarantee. And then I say, all right, I follow. Either way, something asked you to ask about flame retardants, so you say it could have been the database raising it as a flag, or it could have been whatever you were looking at about cladding. Answer, yeah. Now, we have a statement from John Parsons. Do you know Mr. John Parsons?
Yes, I do.
What was his role, and who was he?
Effectively, the database manager for the assets and regeneration team.
Right. I see. Can we look at his statement? I just want to show you something in it. TMO 00870938. That's TMO 00890. TMO 008700938. And if we go to paragraph 8 in that document on page 2, he says, I have been asked how the Keystone system was used by the TMO to manage and govern its fire safety management systems. However, Keystone was not used to manage the TMO's fire safety management systems. It was not used as a workflow for the fire risk assessments, nor was it used to monitor the completion of actions arising from those assessments. It is my understanding that servicing and inspection of fire safety equipment was recorded in spreadsheets managed by the contracts management team. And then at paragraph 9, he says, fire risk assessments were managed by the TMO's health and safety team using their own methods. That being said, if the fire risk assessor wanted to know certain information about gas and electric records, for example, Keystone would hold that information and it was readily available to anyone who wished or who need to see it. Do you accept that the Keystone database didn't contain any prompts regarding the fire retardancy of cladding panels?
I said at the time I wasn't 100% sure, but I did think there was a new column for it and that it might have had a prompt on it. What John has said is accurate. I'm not contradicting him. What I'm saying is that there was cladding there and I thought it had a prompt on it, but I wasn't 100% sure. But it did. Keystone didn't manage the fire safety systems. He's right.
So I see. So this wasn't the database. What was the database which raised the flag?
The Keystone database is about the stock. It's about the asset. So as I explained, it's about the components that make up the building. For example, is it gas heated? Is it electric heated? So it didn't have the fire safety servicing information on it. It had the information on the construction of the buildings and the services within, whether it was communal boilers, individual heating, that sort of thing. But say that's I'm clear on this. This isn't a contradiction. I'm just trying to explain.
Right. So can we be clear that the Keystone database wasn't the database that asked you or prompted you to ask the question initially of Artelia about the fire retardancy or an issue about the fire retardancy requirements of the cladding?
No, the Keystone database was where I had to enter the fact that the building was clad because it was part of a construction description of the building.
Yes. I'm now not clear of what your evidence is.
Sorry.
Was the database from which you got the prompt the Keystone database or not?
Because I entered cladding onto the Keystone database, that was the prompt.
I see. Right. Can I then go to the document I wanted to show you, but I gave the wrong reference to? It's TMO 00870-856. This is in the context of the discussion which you told us about yesterday, where Simon Lawrence had given you the assurance that the cladding was inert and wouldn't burn. Now, this is an email from you to somebody within the TMO called 8J Selhep, and also to Peter Madison and Alex Bosman. Just to help me, 8J Selhep is who?
It's actually J. Selhep who took over from David Gibson as head of capital.
I see.
Whatever the team was called at the time.
Right. And Alex Bosman, board, wasn't he?
No, Alex Bosman is equivalent to David, but he dealt with the contract side of the organisation.
Right. Now, the timing of this email is important. You sent it on the 14th of June at 11:30 in the morning. Can you see that?
Yes.
Now, on the morning, or late morning, of the 14th of June, Grenfell Tower was still on fire, wasn't it?
Yes.
And here we see a list of matters and some attachments, and they're quite detailed. The attachments include progress meeting minutes, building control site inspections, and Part 2 preliminaries, among other things. And then we can see a list of topics. The contract is 1, 2 M&E, 3 building control. And building control says, comment on cladding being in good order and nearly complete as attached in March 2016. I've already sent to Janice and Alex the completion certificate. 4, Clerk of Works role. And underneath that it says, Clerk of Works report on the cladding and progress generally. Nothing, it should say, in March 2016 that the lower 3 floors are to be completed by cherry picker. I know that all floors were signed off as offered up. I'm looking for this report now. 5, CDM. Work started on site June 2014. PC, that's practical completion, July 2016. And then the rest is about CDM regulations changed. And then if we turn to the top of page 2, we can see how this is signed off. Please advise if there is any missing information that you would like to see. I'm still trawling through the directories. Now, the first question is, what prompted you to send this email?
I believe that the morning after the fire, that there were discussions, obviously amongst the managers, as to what information would be needed in the longer term. And so this was us. I don't know if I was given a list or whether I was left to my own devices, but they were clear that they would be looking to see information which we would need to be providing. And obviously this is the forum.
Were you asked for any of these categories of information?
That's what I'm not sure on. I don't know whether I was given a list or whether I was told, what have you got that you think is useful? I don't remember.
Right. You see, what's missing from it is any suggestion of surprise or shock that the building was burning in the light of the assurance that you say Simon Lawrence gave both you and to David Gibson.
Would you like to break for a bit? Right, Bill Rice, 5 minutes. Right, 5 minutes. Right, would you ask Miss Williams to come back in, please? Now, Miss Williams, do you feel able to carry on?
I would like to carry on, yes.
I'm sure you would. When I look, we'll have another break at about noon in any event.
Yes.
And if at any stage you feel that you need to take another break, will you just make that clear to me? And we'll give you time.
Thank you.
All right? Okay.
Right.
Yes, Mr. Tenant.
Right. Now, Ms. Williams, I was showing you a document, and I was about to ask you a question about it. What I'm going to do, I think, is park that question. I'm going to come back to it, then we can get on to something that's perhaps a little bit less upsetting.
Thank you.
Spreadsheets. That might help. Can I take you to day 54, page 92, please, and go to line 22. And at the bottom of the page, page 92, we're talking about roles, and I ask you a question. Do you think at that time, September 2013, just so to help you, before the July 2014 formal contract, Artelia were the employer's agent on the Grenfell Tower project? Yes. What gave you to think that? And then over the page, you say, there was a spreadsheet with roles and the fee figures against it. And then if you stick on page 93 and go a little bit lower down, you can see at line 18, I asked the question, did you know at that stage in your exercise of the function of monitoring the budget who the TMO had retained as its professionals at that date on the Grenfell Tower project? Answer, yes, because there was a figure for works and then there were several consultants named and a figure against their name. Can you remember who the consultants were? And then over to page 94, it would be the ones who I believe went on, did go on with the project. So it was Artelia, Curtins, Studio E, and there was a couple of odd ones that I don't know where they came from, and I never heard of them since. What about Exova? I don't know whether Exova were on that. I put them on subsequent, but initially I don't know that they were on there. Now, you also, I think, said that you would email a version of this spreadsheet periodically to Magna Novak. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you would save the version on your directory, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Now, we may, and this is where I think I need your help, have found a version of that document within the TMO documents. Can I go, please, to the native version of TMO 00854-806? TMO 00854-806. And this is the spreadsheet, or a spreadsheet, we can see. And if we look at the top of it, we can see that it's entitled Management Consultant Project Cost Record, Project Grenfell Tower Regeneration. You see that?
Yes.
And then along the bottom, there are a number of tabs: design team, management, survey consultants, other costs and staff costs, and then overall project fees and survey and Claire's costs. Yes. Now, the Claire's costs column, is that yours?
It would be, yes.
So is this a spreadsheet you recognise?
The Claire's costs is a tab, it's not a column.
It's a tab, you're quite right. Although it's not in a colour, so I thought it might be a column, but you say it's a tab, so it can be opened up. Right. Was this the spreadsheet you were describing yesterday in the examination I showed you from the transcript?
Would I be able to see the one that says overall project, fees and survey?
Yes, I'm sure that can be clicked on and opened.
And Claire's cost, could I look at that, please?
Yes.
Yes, this is an example, yes. This is what I was talking about.
Right. I see. So would you have responsibility for making the inputs into all of these columns, or just the Claire's costs column?
all of them. I don't know if this was the latest version, but I would input into all of them, and then I had a separate folder called invoices. So the invoices would then match to the figures in the columns.
Right. Well, let's just take it in stages then. If we go to the first tab, where we very first started off, I think, which is there, thank you, we can see that the project manager was Paul Dunkerton,
Yes.
and the budget holder was Mark Anderson.
Yes.
Now, does that tell us that this document started its life before you arrived at the TMO?
Yes.
Now, we may be able to date this document. If we go to Claire's costs, at the top of column E, we can see 30th of November 2015. Does that tell us that this is when you first saw it, or is it this the last version of the document, or just one in a middle run? Do you know?
Possibly one towards the end, because it says no further costs, isn't it? The yellow columns indicate no further costs. So it was one toward November 15. So it was at
Right.
that time, point in time.
Yes. I'm not representing to you, Miss Williams, that this is the only version that we have. But given that you mentioned this yesterday, we've been doing some researches, and this is one we have found, and there may very well be others from other dates.
Yeah.
But I am interested in this one for a reason, or for a number of reasons. Can we look at row 6 in column B? You can see there, it says DDA and then ASSMT hyphen bonnet. What is that? Do you know?
No, I don't. I don't know whether it was done before my time, or if it was done subsequent, because I said I thought there was somebody called Jane. So I don't know if this was before my time or as part of the later scheme.
Right.
So-
Well, you were certainly there in November 2015, and so can we take it that this is one of those spreadsheets on which you would have worked, so would
Yes.
have seen at the time?
It was a cost that was attributable to the project, yes.
Yeah. And therefore, when you saw this and worked on it at that time, you, I imagine, must have seen DDA, ASSMT bonnet,
Yes.
but you can't help with that. There's a figure paid to date of £1,690.
Yes.
Do you know what that was for?
No, I'm afraid I don't.
It looks as if something of that order was paid in respect of a DDA, and maybe SSMT means assessment. You
Yes.
tell me.
Yes, no, I agree with you. There may be an invoice in my invoice folder, but I don't actually remember.
You don't remember?
that. No.
Right. Can we look at row 29 now? Same page.
Can I just interrupt you to ask, is bonnet likely to be a person's name or possibly a reference to some consultants? Does that ring any bell with you?
No, I don't remember the name at all, I'm afraid.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Can we look, please, at row 29 under surveys? And there you can see Exova fire strategy with the figures £9,286 paid to date as the total due for the project as at that date. And then under column G it says need more fire strat work, fire strategy work. Did you enter that?
I believe it's a column I inserted, yes.
Yes. Does that tell us that at this time, at least, November 15, you knew that Exova's work was incomplete?
Because I was, yes, expecting no more costs against it, but I assumed it would come via Ryden if there was any more work outstanding.
Well, can you help us? What does need more fire strategy work mean?
I was probably just thinking we need more, there will be more work, but it won't be attributable to the project, it won't appear on my costs.
You need more work, but it won't be attributable to the project. Why do you say that?
In terms of the cost, because as we've talked about previously, Exova would be employed by Ryden, so I would not have any more cost to pay to Exova.
Now, I can see that what had been paid to date, the £9,286, was the total due for the project, but you've added need more fire strategy work. And that's presumably over and above what had been invoiced and paid. What was the fire strategy work that you thought you needed more of?
I don't know whether that comment was put in early days and I hadn't revisited, but as this is budgetary, this is just saying that there will be no more cost to the project from Exova.
You said at line 4, just on the last page of the transcript, that you believe it's a column that you inserted.
Yes.
So can you tell us more about the circumstances in which you inserted the comment, need more fire strategy work?
It could be that I put it in early doors, I don't remember.
In early doors would have been September 2013.
After September 2013, yes. It could have been 2013, could have been 2014.
Right. Do you remember when you first started making inputs into this spreadsheet?
I started in September, so I would have thought by October I would have been looking at it.
Right. Can you remember what it was that prompted you or led you to think that you needed more fire strategy work done?
No, I don't remember the context for that comment, I'm afraid.
Did it ever get updated?
I believe there would have been one at practical completion,
Did
which would have been...
Did the need... Sorry, do you want to finish your answer?
No, sorry.
No, that's all right. Did you ever close out the need for more fire strategy work as an item?
In terms of budget, this records that there's no more cost to come, but I'd say I don't know the date of that comment and I don't know what it meant.
Did you ever talk to anybody within the TMO or Ryden or Artelia about having more fire strategy work done?
No, I don't think so.
Why didn't you see to a conclusion the need that you've identified here?
This comment could have been put in any time in 14, 15. It was a comment that may have related to an earlier stage where there were more fees outstanding. It could be something I should have taken out because the fee, as you see, was completed. So I can't account for why it's there now, and I can't remember why I put it in the first place, unless it's to nudge me at an earlier stage that more fee was outstanding.
Well, it doesn't say anything about fees. It actually says need more fire strategy WK, which I assume is work.
Yeah, and I assume that the earlier version of this would say in the third column, total due for project, whereas it says 9 to whatever it says, 86. Under the paid to date, it may have only had 6,000. So that was just saying it needs a little bit more work. That's why there's an outstanding amount of fee.
So the work, just to be clear, are you telling us that what was needed was more work by you on the fire strategy figures, or more work done by the fire strategy consultant?
This whole spreadsheet is budgetary. So what I would do is the purpose of the two columns, as you understand, is to look at what the total for the project would be and what we've paid to date. So it just gives me an indication of what was outstanding, so that if an invoice arrived that was not within these figures, I would then go back and interrogate it. So this says to me that at an earlier stage, I would know what the total cost for Exova would be, which is the 9,000 figure, but the paid to date figure may not have been at that. As I say, it could have been 4,000, 5,000, and it would just say we need more work. That's why that total amount is in there. It's a little bit simplistic, but that is the way that I would do it, just as a nudge to myself. That was the difference between the two. And obviously it's probably fairly clear, but that was the way I did it.
Well, by this time, of course, this is November 2015, the fire strategy for Grenfell Tower, the outline fire safety strategy, issue 3, was more than 2 years old. You can see here that the budget had been exhausted and paid. What was it that needed more work?
I reiterate, this is a budgetary spreadsheet. It wasn't a workload spreadsheet. I believe that this comment related to an earlier stage where the total fee hadn't been expended, and so it was just prompting me that there was more work to be done.
So why come November 2015 then didn't you remove the phrase "need more fire strategy work"? That's what you would have done on reviewing it.
Yes, no, I wonder, having seen yesterday's paperwork, that their fee was about 8,006. So I wonder if they added an extra invoice in, and I might have put a comment in to show that that was why it was there.
Right. Just going back to line 6, DDA ASSMT Bonnet. Does the name David Bonnet Associates mean anything to you?
No.
Right. Can we then go back to where we were yesterday when we broke? And we were looking at the appointment of John Rowan Partners. TMO 1000620, please. TMO 1000620. We looked at the ITT yesterday, Ms. Williams, and now we're going to look at the appointment letter that you sent to Grenfell Verdi. And again, we looked at that. I think you told us you had no part in writing it. Can I just revisit the question that you answered, I think, yesterday afternoon? What was it, in general terms, that led you to pick JRP over the other bidder in circumstances where the price was almost identical, given the disappointing experience that JRP had had with cladding?
I don't know what disappointing experience JRP had with cladding.
Well, if you go to page 2, we looked at this yesterday afternoon. There was the feedback. Do you remember?
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, thank you.
That's quite all right. And you say, well, you said at point 2 in the first paragraph, 3 lines down, that it was slightly disappointing that there's limited detail of his experience of cladding works.
Right, okay.
And my question was, what, in those circumstances, why did you pick JRP as clerk of works as opposed to the other bidder? Do you remember?
No, I know we went through the process. I know Jenny and I evaluated them both. I think it was a process, but I don't remember much about the other tenderer, because obviously I worked with these people from then on, so I was aware of them, but I don't remember the other people at all, so I'm afraid I can't help.
Right. Moving forward in time then, I think it's right that on the 16th of September 2014, you had a meeting with John Rowan Partners. And at that meeting, do you recall a meeting on that date or around that date with them?
Which year was it?
2014, 16th of September 2014.
I did meet with them. I'm not clear which date. But
Right. Now, John White gave evidence, and just for our record, it's day 42, page 133, line 2, that at this meeting, TMO provided the formal brief to the Clerk of Works, and you told them, he said, what you wanted them to do during their appointment. Do you remember a meeting of that kind?
yes,
Right. And do you agree that at that meeting you discussed the specific tasks that you wanted John Rowan Partners to perform?
yes,
And would you agree that that was, in essence, a meeting that set out the scope of John Rowan Partners' role, or at least provided more clarity on that role?
yes, and it set up the communication between the parties. Yes.
Yes. Now, let's look at the notes of that meeting that we have. At JRP 60332, and I'd like to go to page 2 in that email run there, which is an email from you on the 18th of September 2014 to Louis Zarawa, if that's how you pronounce it, and tell me if that's wrong. You say, Louis, it was good to meet you and our 2 new clerks of works on Tuesday. And then 4 lines down in the first paragraph, you say, you have a copy of the project programme, which is due to complete 4th September 2015. I said that I would like to skew the number of days potentially for each clerk of works, which was originally proposed as 40 days each. It is likely that I may need more days for the M&E clerk of works to deal with issues of heating installation within the occupied flats. When I come back with start dates, we can talk over how this would work out, as obviously it is programme dictated. Now, you say that the original proposal was 40 days each, but actually, do you remember when we looked at the original proposal, it was 70 days each, wasn't it? 70 on M&E and 70 on general.
Yeah, sorry, I don't remember, but...
Well, if we look, we looked at that yesterday afternoon. Do you want to go back to the document?
No, that's fine. I'm sure your question will be clear.
My question is, why did you say 40 hours here in circumstances where the original proposal was for 70 days?
I don't know if it's a typo. I agree we would have been talking about 70 days, if that was what the proposal said initially.
Right. So you think it was a typo, do you?
Yes, I wasn't knocking down the number of days having just met them.
Right. Okay. Now, you also saying that you may need more days for the M&E clerk of works. Would that necessarily take time away from the general building clerk of work resource?
They had separate roles, so no, it wouldn't have taken away from the general building.
I see. So it wouldn't have affected the number of days that the general clerk of works would have been on site?
No, his days were again reviewed because of the progress and
Right.
the content of the project.
Can we go to the transcript of John White's evidence at day 42, page 173? Day 42, page 173, and I'd like to pick it up at line 9. Where you say, this is John White's evidence, where he says, Claire Williams wanted me to really focus on the residents, you know. You remember I had 120 flats that were being operated on and worked on, and her focus was to make sure the residents, to me, she kept on telling me, I was in close conversation with Claire Williams, you know, many days, and she often asked me specifically to go to flat such and such to see that resident. So a lot of my focus was really on what she wanted me to do, and that was to focus on the residents. Now, is it right that Ryden were in charge of resident liaison during the build, during the construction?
Yes,
Yes. And they themselves, I think, had a dedicated RLO or RLOs.
they did, yes.
And do you remember who they were?
It was Maxine, I don't remember her surname first, then it was Linda Prentice, and there were 2 seniors. There were Nikki Donnelly and Christina Stefanu.
Definitely, yes, okay. What did you expect the Clerk of Works to do with residents that wasn't covered either by you or by the Ryden RLOs, resident liaison officers?
The RLOs weren't technical people. They made appointments for Ryden. They wouldn't inspect work. They did all the soft part of the operation, talking to people and explaining things if people weren't clear, or getting a site manager to talk to a resident if there was any uncertainty and they felt they couldn't help them. The RLOs did a lot of the backup work to facilitate Ryden getting access to the flats and to make sure that everybody was communicated with.
Right. Given that those were the roles that the RLOs for Ryden occupied, what was it that the Clerk of Works was to do by way of looking after the residents or focusing on the residents?
Yeah, so the RLOs had the opening, the introductory, the making sure that residents were happy role. It was, the soft skills, the talking to people. Whereas the clerk of works would go into flats once the works had been done to check that the residents were happy with the work and to check that they were worked on satisfactorily. For example, John would be going into the flats to look at the window installations, and quite often he would help people open the windows because they opened in 2 different modes. So the site manager would have explained it, the RLO would have explained it, but quite often a third time helped. So John would do that if the resident didn't understand. But I say, he went into the flats, the windows. Oh, we did entry phones as well. We put new entry phone handsets in. So he may have looked at that because it's not heavily M&E.
Who would facilitate the going into residents' flats by the clerk of works? Would that also be the Ryden RLO?
That would be Ryden RLO, yeah.
I see. So does it work this way, that the Ryden RLOs would talk to the residents, use their soft skills, such as they were, to talk to them and let them in, and then the clerk of works would do the technical assessment of the work done within the flats?
Yes.
And would the clerk of works talk to the residents about whether they were happy with the work that was done or whether there were any functional difficulties with those works?
They would. They would talk to them as well in passing, perhaps to say, oh, how long did it take? Or things of that sort to pick up, not just that it was done, but they would try and pick up any other issues over housekeeping and things like that.
Right. Can I just take you then back to the ITT, the invitation to tender for the clerk of works? That's JRP 6011 at page 5. At page 5 there, the clerk of works is referred to in the red as adopting a proactive approach and assisting the contractors to set agreed common standards, etc. But there's nothing there about residents that we can see. In fact, the only reference in this document is one about passing on complaints, and I think we can see that at the very top of the page in the last bullet point on the list that starts the page before. Do you see that? Passing on details of any complaints or concerns raised by residents or other stakeholders when these are passed directly to the clerk of works.
Yeah.
Given that that was the duty set out in the ITT regarding residents, did you fundamentally change the role of the clerk of works when you met them and told them that you wanted to focus on the residents?
No, it was an occupied building, and they were always going to be inspecting the works within the occupied flats. They were personable workers, and
Right.
they did that as they were asked.
We're now turning to the reporting. We know that John Rowe and Partners delivered their first report number 1, in October 2015. And we can see that as JRP 50338 at page 3. This comes to you on the 17th of October 2014. Hi Claire, peace finding closed our first site inspection report for your attention. Do you see that?
It's very small. Could we?
Yes. Is it?
Oh yeah. Okay. Thank
Let me
you.
blow, yeah,
Yes,
blow
thank
that
you.
up. So this is an email from John White to you on the 17th of October 2014. Hi Claire, peace finding closed our first site inspection report for your attention. If you have any queries, please do not hesitate to contact me. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, if we go to page 2 in the email run, and the report itself, I should say, just for our record, is at TMO 008367885. There's no need to go to it. If you go to page 2 in this email run, we can see that you wrote to John White on the 20th of October 2014, and you say, this is halfway down the screen. John, I have not agreed a start date for you yet, and only found out last week that you had an induction. I need to monitor the works and your hours, which are not yet agreed. Louis, can you please ring me to discuss this? John, please do no more inspections until we have agreed a basis for your services. Were you concerned about the cost of JRP inspections at this time, October 2014?
No, it was more about the relevance of the service. I believe initially that Ryden's first element of works was installing the boilers in the basement so that we could connect everybody to the new heating system. That was the on the critical path for the scheme. So the M&E works kicked off first, and I think we might have, or I might have said to them, oh, you know, this, we will need you on site soon, but it was specifically for the M&E because that had an earlier start date. So this is just me trying to fine-tune the arrangement.
Right. When you say you were trying to fine-tune the arrangement, you told them in very clear terms, Miss Williams, don't do any more inspections until we've agreed a basis for your services. This is a stop notice, in effect, isn't it?
For John White, yes,
Yes.
definitely.
Yes, indeed. I'm not talking about Tony Batty
Yeah.
or Silcock Dawson. I'm talking about John Rowe and Partners, yes?
Yeah.
Yes. Now, in fact, it's right that the first proper site visit, I say proper, the first site visit that you approved, I think, for John Rowe and Partners was in February 2015. Is that right?
Possibly, yes.
Well, let's just, you say possibly. Let's look at your February 2019 statement, TMO 0084036 please, at page 51. Let's go to that just to make sure what we're talking about. And at paragraph 283, you say John Rowe and Partners reported progress on 4th and 17th of February. You see that?
Yes.
In their site inspection reports. And this is in the context of early 2015.
Yes.
Well, let's go to the first of those, which you exhibit as Exhibit 84, TMO 008322024, please. That is report number 3, early February 2015. We've seen that there was one in October 2014.
Yeah.
Was there an interim report between then and February 15? Do you remember?
You're saying there's a missing number 2, isn't there?
Yes.
I presume so. Their record keeping was generally good.
Do you remember whether there was, in fact, a site inspection by your clerk of works, or by John Rowe and Partners particularly, between October 2014 and February 2015?
I don't remember specifically, no.
Did you, do you remember when you agreed the fees with them so that they could then go about doing their inspections?
No, I think when the clerk of works ITT was set up, it was set up a little bit as an exercise, but what we did, we reviewed the works and the scope of works and made sure that their times matched when they were needed. So whatever was set up initially was a starting point rather than the way that it ultimately worked.
So we've seen the stop notice that you'd sent him on the 20th of October earlier on. Was there a time when you sent him a message saying, now start doing your inspections?
There would have been, yes.
You say there would have been. Do you remember whether there was?
I don't have the paperwork to hand and I don't remember, but there would have been a time when I said, John, we'll need you in a week. This is because the contractor is doing this part of the programme. At the moment in October 14, the demolitions were underway or you know, things that he couldn't have a positive impact on, whereas I knew I would need his input later when we started to work in the residents' homes.
Does it mean that there was in fact no site inspection between by John Rowe and Partners as your Clerk of Works for general building works between mid-October 2014 and early February 2015.
Sorry, the first report you showed me was dated when?
It's dated the 15th of October and it was sent to you on the 17th of October.
So and there was one in the middle, possibly not, because as I say, the works on site at the time could be putting up the mast climbers, which say it wouldn't be one of John Rowan's tasks to watch them put the mast climbers up. So it was making sure there was prudent use of their time.
I follow. Can we now just look at the question of inspection by John Rowan, in particular of the cladding, and start with the transcript of John White's evidence on day 42, please, at page 170. And at line 24, Miss Grogan asks him, did you ever inspect the cladding before the cladding panels had been installed? And over the page, we can see John White's answer at line 1. Not specifically. I mean, my general inspections I did, but I was never asked to inspect anything specifically before the cladding panels went on. No. And then on the same page at page 171 at line 16, there's an answer, yeah, and then question line 17. And at the time you were observing insulation and cavity barriers, what were you looking for? And he says at line 19, generally, that the work was neat and tidy, it wasn't damaged, that everything seemed to be the same. You know, it was all fitted with the same detail, there was no damage, and the insulation there was no holes in the insulation, the fixings were not loose. Generally, I was just checking that there was nothing that stood out. And then if we turn over the page to page 172, Miss Grogan asks him, you say there it was all fitted with the same detail, so you were looking for consistency. Answer, yes. Not checking against any drawings. Answer, yes. Now, is that the sort of check that you expected the Clerk of Works to be performing?
Yes, I was expecting him to look at consistency of installation.
Right. But not against drawings?
He would have the drawings accessible in Ryden's office if there was anything he was concerned about, but he would also say, I know he had conversations with the installers while they were putting the cladding on.
Now, if a Clerk of Works is only given one day a week to do these inspections, does it not follow that the checking will be focusing only on manifest defects and not anything which would require an in-depth, invasive inspection?
Yes, we've talked about the fact that the Clerk of Works was an additional tier that the TMO had, because clearly Ryden had employed a specialist subcontractor who had their own supervisors. So this was another tier. So John White did ask if he found that he wasn't getting enough time, he would ask for more time. And I believe what happened ultimately was he signed off a couple of floors at a time. But it would quite often be at the end when there was the finished cladding panel, he wouldn't actually see whatever was behind it.
No, exactly. And that's what you wanted, was it?
We just wanted another pair of eyes and somebody who would ask the questions. But as I say, it was an extra layer because Ryden had responsibility. They had their own site managers as well as obviously their specialist subcontractor having their own supervisory.
Yes, I understand that. But just to understand precisely the scope of what you expected the Clerk of Works to do, I think you're telling us that what Mr. White has told the inquiry is the job that you expected him to do.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And you therefore you didn't expect the Clerk of Works to do an in-depth invasive inspection?
No.
And that you only expected them to visit, say, once a week to get a snapshot?
John would ask if he needed more time, he would ask more time. And I don't think we ever said, no, we won't give you that time.
Right.
But we did rely on him and his experience to advise as to whether there was adequate time for what he was doing.
Yes. I want to turn to a different topic altogether, which is the relations with residents during the build. And I should just say, before I do, that some of this, of course, trespasses into Module 3, and there may be further questions on this topic for you later. But at the moment, we're focusing very much on the build and where the Module 1 issues come up. Now, can I just refer you, I'm not going to take you to it, but just tell you what you say in your February 2019 statement, paragraph 18 on page 4. You describe your role by saying, I fronted the scheme for residents as their TMO point of contact. Can you confirm that?
Yes.
Can we then go to your February 2019 statement at page 30? I want to go to paragraph 170. And you say there, whenever there were any public meetings involving Grenfell Tower, the meetings could become difficult with disruptive conduct from a small number of residents who took over and dominated the meetings with their comments, to the exclusion of other residents who complained to me about this. As a result, you say, at the drop-in session on the 12th of December 2013, we undertook a survey on how people wanted to be consulted, which showed the majority of people did not want formal meetings. This was published to residents in the January 2014 newsletter. This meant that subsequent consultation was largely by drop-in sessions, newsletters, and on a one-to-one basis wherever or whenever that could be achieved. Were there public meetings that you described specifically about the refurbishment project?
Sorry, were there?
Yes, were there meetings that you describe specifically about the refurbishment project?
Yes.
They were. Now, we know you started in September 2013, and you say that on the 12th of December 2013 you undertook a survey. Had you experienced many public meetings during that period?
I think I'd been to 2, 3.
2 or 3. Do you remember
Yeah.
when they were, roughly, during that autumn period?
I remember one of them was with 2 councillors, but I don't remember the dates, I'm afraid.
Right. You see, in the first sentence of that paragraph, you say the meetings could become difficult with disruptive conduct from a small number of residents who took over and dominated the meetings, etc. Were you at meetings where you experienced that happening?
Yes.
You were. And were those meetings that happened before the drop-in session on the 12th of December 2013?
There was definitely one before, and
Right.
I know there were several, or at least one after.
Right. So this is something you experienced firsthand, not something you'd been told by somebody else?
Yeah, no, I was there.
Right. When you say difficult and with disruptive conduct, what do you mean?
Like any meeting, sometimes you find that some people have a view that they want to get across, and they take the opportunity to take the floor to the exclusion of the topic that you want to talk about.
And you say to the exclusion of the topic you want to talk about. Does that mean that they wanted to talk about one thing and you wanted to talk about something else and not address their concerns?
No, what can happen in meetings, and I've dealt with many resident meetings over many years, is that you might get people who have very strongly held views, and what they want to do is use your meeting to express that. So you are there to talk to people, to help explain a subject, and a couple of people then stop the rest of the group who are there, in their own time, from hearing the information that you are trying to get across.
You refer to a small number of residents. Who were they?
Different people at different times. And so with different views over different things sometimes.
We've got one meeting you've identified in the period between your joining the TMO in September 2013 and the 12th of December 2013. So in this period, can you identify by name the number of residents who took over and dominated the meetings, as you say?
Yeah, the one in the early days, one of the first ones I attended was Mr. Defan was one of the people who had these strongly held views.
And was he somebody who you say here became difficult with disruptive conduct?
He was somebody who would come to mind, but he wasn't the only person.
Who else was?
Sorry, they're no longer with us.
We're getting to the time when I thought we'd have a break. Would you like to take it now?
No, I'm fine, but so I'm reticent to talk about people.
I understand. All right. So people are no longer with us. And you say other residents complained to you about this.
Yes.
Did they do that in writing?
No, people would come and talk to me and apologise for our disrupted meetings.
And who were they? Can you name any of them?
Over the period, many people did. There were a lot of very good people. So, no, I say it was common because I think there were many people who knew what we were trying to do and they wanted to hear what we had to say. But I can't remember the names, I'm sorry.
You can't. Now, the methods of consultation that you used are listed in paragraph 170 in the last sentence there. And you say this was done largely by drop-in sessions, newsletters, and on a one-to-one basis, wherever or whenever that could be achieved. Now, newsletters, is this right, are, just in very general terms, very much about the TMO telling residents what's happening with the bill. They're a one-way street, aren't they?
They were put together with Ryden's information because, as you say, people did need to know what was happening next. So, yes, it was an information letter.
Yes. They're not. Newsletters aren't really a forum for discussion, are they? They're about telling, not listening.
No, it was the written word saying if you have any queries or want to contact us, here are our details.
Yes. So the only face-to-face or opportunities for discussion where you could hear, as opposed to tell, would be drop-in sessions and the one-to-one discussions.
And the Ryden RLOs would pick up if there was anybody who had any queries who were perhaps reticent to do it in a bigger forum, and so quite often I would go and talk to people individually as they identified them.
I see. Did you think that those ways of getting information or listening to the residents, so drop-in sessions and one-to-one sessions, were better or more effective ways of really getting to the bottom of residents' concerns in place of public meetings?
Yes, and statistically I would say that was proven.
How was that?
When we had meetings, you would get, say, the first one I attended that say was disruptive, there was, and two councillors were there, there were probably 8 residents, something like that. But in the drop-in sessions, we would do a morning or an afternoon and an evening. So I think at one point we reached 65% of households, which is exceptional for resident consultation. Usually you don't even get 10%. You can all be there on a frozen Wednesday night and nobody's there, but the drop-in sessions were held within the building, and so we had a lot. Statistically, we reached far more people than any of the evening meetings that we'd seen, or daytime meetings even, that we'd had at Grenfell.
I see. And at the drop-in sessions, would people come to you at a desk and talk to you privately without others listening?
We tended to have the drop-in sessions when we had something physical to show people, whether it was the new windows, the HIU position, or the heating layout. So that they tended to be focused, and I would arrange for our consultants to be available or Ryden's people to be available. So the drop-in sessions were in a 2-bedroom flat, so people could move around freely, look at the installations and talk to any of the people from the project team side who would talk them through any queries they had and explain how the proposal worked.
Yes, I see. And what would you do with the information that you receive from residents during the drop-in sessions and the one-to-one sessions?
I collated it, and we would then go back and talk about it and see if there were things there that we should be reviewing to change the way we worked.
And how would those views then feed into project decisions generally?
I would then talk to my manager, David, about, look, somebody said this, why aren't we looking at that? And then we would take it to the project team.
Right. Was there an organised system whereby the views from drop-in sessions and one-to-one sessions would be collated and then passed up to management for decisions? Or was it done on an ad hoc basis?
It was done more informally.
Right. Can we then go to look at Ryden's role in dealing with residents? Because you mentioned Ryden's. Staying with this statement, can we please go back to page 24 and look at paragraph 132, towards the foot of the page there. This is under the heading Defect Reporting / Complaints. You say in paragraph 132, all complaints and issues raised by residents on works were initially directed to Ryden's RLOs for progression within Ryden whilst they were on site. I would then take up any matter that could not be straightforwardly resolved. Did you instruct Ryden on the processes that they should use to engage residents?
They had their own system of working, which was in their booklet that I believe they gave to every resident, and it was similar to what the TMO would have done. So we didn't tell them how to do it, but we were aware how they did it because they'd given us a process.
They'd given you a process,
Yes.
I see. Was that process a written process where you could see?
Yes, it was in their booklet, and so I believe they gave the booklet to every resident as well.
Right. Did you supervise or monitor, perhaps is a better word, how Ryden were engaging with residents from time to time?
I would personally witness Linda Prentice dealing with residents, and I would talk to her every week, if I was on site a couple of times a week, to say, is there anything I needed to know about? Is there anybody I needed to visit? Is there anything that you need some help with?
Did you monitor the management of each specific complaint that came in, or did you monitor simply the way in which the machinery was working?
I would say by talking to her, Linda Prentice, who was the main day-to-day person, I was aware of what was going on, and say I did intervene, but probably by exception.
I see. And you were satisfied throughout, were you, that Linda Prentice and her team were performing their residents' liaison role and dealing with complaints in a way that you were happy with?
I was only aware of one complaint which seemed to be ongoing, but otherwise I wasn't aware of any issues that they weren't dealing with, because Linda was a very good RLO.
What was the ongoing complaint?
It was a flat where there'd been a leak above, and the lady had had some damaged items.
Right. Can we look at your September 2019 statement, please, at page 19? I want to go to paragraph 83 there in the middle of the page. And you say, if a resident was unhappy with the response they received from Ryden, they could initially talk to me to see if I could resolve their complaint, or they could escalate it to the TMO's complaints process. In addition to this, there was a housing office within a 2-minute walk of Grenfell Tower where residents could raise queries, concerns, or complaints. So do we take it from that a complaint could be escalated to you if Ryden couldn't sort it out?
Yes, and so generally Linda would say, can you help me with this resident? And I would go and talk to them.
Right. Now, we heard from Mr. Lawrence when he gave oral evidence to the inquiry that the TMO had briefed Ryden on what he described as rebel residents. And just for our own reference purposes, that's day 25, page 73 at lines 3 to 6, and earlier on page 72 at lines 12 to 24. That's what he told us. Do you know where Mr. Lawrence might have got the expression rebel residents from?
No,
It wasn't a phrase you used, was it?
no,
Or was it?
no.
The expression itself obviously has connotations. Can you tell us which group or groups of people Mr. Lawrence might mean?
I don't know if he was thinking of anybody in particular. It's not a term the TMO would use.
Right. Did you or anybody else that you know of at the TMO ever brief Ryden on particular residents to watch out for who were particularly vocal?
I suspect there may have been a briefing as to anybody who was vulnerable or anybody who they needed to be aware of.
Well, vulnerable is one thing, but anybody who they needed to be aware of is a different thing, possibly in this context. My question again, did you or anybody else, to your knowledge at the TMO, ever brief Ryden on particular residents to look out for who were particularly vocal or disruptive or difficult?
I think we would have had a duty to explain the composition of the residents in terms of how Ryden were going to carry out their works, and if there was anybody there who was going to perhaps cause them difficulty in carrying out their works, then they would have been picked up. That would have been part of the briefing, just to make sure they knew what they were, who they were going to be working with.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment for the next break?
Yes, I think it is. We'll take a short break at this point, Miss Williams. How are you getting on, Mr. Minute?
Quite well. I'm not sure that I can be confident. In fact, I can't be confident of finishing by 1 o'clock. If I can be confident, I won't finish by 1 o'clock, but I won't take the rest of the day, even allowing for the 30-minute TMO question break.
Yes, all right. Just wanted to see how we're getting on. I'm sorry, it's obviously going on longer than you would have wished, and I'm sorry about that. But we'll take a 10-minute or so break now. Come back at 12:15, please, and that'll give you a chance to get your breath back.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. Quarter past 12 then, please. Thank you. Yes, would you ask Mr. Williams to come back in, please? Right, happy to keep going?
Yes.
Good, thank you very much. Yes, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Williams, this morning we were looking at one of your spreadsheets, and we were looking at, in particular, the reference to the DDA. Do you remember?
Yes.
And I asked you about whether you'd heard of anybody called Bonnet. I may be able to prompt your recollection a bit better than that. Can we please go to TMO 0083497 834979. These are the minutes of the meeting, the Grenfell Design Team meeting of the 22nd of October 2013. And we can see from the list of attendees that you were there. And if you cast your eye down, you can see under item 1.2 BS, that's Bruce Soanes, confirmed that David Bonnet Associates are on board as DDA advisor. Does that help with your recollection about the role of David Bonnet or Bonnet?
They're still not familiar to me, but I can see that that is their role from this minute.
Do you remember any discussion at that meeting about the appointment of a DDA?
No, I don't remember, I'm afraid.
You don't?
No.
So this doesn't trigger any recollection about the name David Bonnet or anything like that?
No, I'm afraid not.
Right. Can we then turn to the subject of Artelia and TMO's complaint about Ryden during the construction process, and begin with ART 406149, please. This is an email chain from the 30th of March 2016, primarily between Neil Reed of Artelia and Steve Blake of Ryden. And at the bottom of page 1, if we can just go to that, you can see an email which is dated the 30th of March 2016 from Neil Reed to Steve Blake. And if you look a little bit lower down the identity of the copyees, we can see that you are copied in on it. And at the very bottom of page 1, and we'll have to go over to page 2, it says, Steve, we are writing to set out our frustrations and concerns about a number of current issues with this project, as both the client team and consultant team hold a perception that Ryden could and should be doing more in the run-up to completion. And over to page 2. We would like to see this email treated as a formal complaint, elevated to requisite level in RML to ensure those empowered to resolve these matters have the opportunity to do so at the earliest convenience. Do you see? And then, in no particular order, there is a list, and the list really comprises 3 topics: resource, meeting attendance, and handover matters. Now, we can see that you were copied in, and it's written by Artelia on your, or the TMO's behalf. Did you agree with its contents?
Yes.
Do you think you saw a draft of this before it went, or when you saw it?
I believe I was aware that it was on being drafted, so yes, I may have seen it.
Right. Did you have any input into its contents before it went? I mean, are these things that you discussed with Artelia with a view to Artelia sending this message?
Yes, we discussed it with Artelia prior to them sending it.
Right. And is it true that you were frustrated with Ryden?
With the slow progress of works and the lack of responsiveness in some areas, yes.
Right. You say slow progress of works. The project was, by this point, very delayed, wasn't it?
Yes.
Were you concerned that Ryden wasn't anxious to get it completed?
Yes, I think we'd been talking for a couple of months about the problems, and Ryden were not upping their resource to meet our queries, our expectation. So this was putting in writing what they'd heard at a meeting several times.
Right. You say they were not upping their resource. Did you have concerns at this time that they had not, in fact, resourced the project properly?
I think towards the middle end of the project, they were short of some of their labour. you appreciate Ryden do construction management, so everybody they employ is a subcontractor. And the Clerk of Works had in their reports been raising the issues of lack of people fitting the cladding. There were reports of slow workmanship in the new flats. Everything was progressing, but at a sedentary rate.
At a sedentary rate?
Well, that was my perception.
You say sedentary, you mean slowly?
Slowly, yes.
Yes. And my question again, because I'm not sure you've really answered it, were you concerned at this time that Ryden had not resourced or were not resourcing the project properly so as to keep it on track?
Yes, and hence this email from our employer's agent.
Yes. Did your concern about inadequate resourcing that you've now confirmed, and we can also see from the email, lead you to be concerned that Ryden might be tempted to deliver poor workmanship or cut corners in order to keep the project on track or within their own budget?
No, that wasn't something that I was aware of, or I heard any of our Clerk of Works say. Nobody had any comment about the quality. It was rather the slow progress, that they hadn't employed enough subcontractors to meet the programme.
Right. Can we then turn to the topic of CDM regulation change? Now, do you accept the basic propositions I'm going to put to you as follows? First of all, until April 2015, the governing regulations were the CDM regulations 2007. Remember that?
Yes.
And then those changed in 2015, when in the April of that year, the CDM regulations 2015 came into force. Yes?
Yes.
And they came into legal effect in October 2015, with a transitional period between April and October of that year. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Right. And after the 6th of October, the new regime under the 2015 regulations was then in place. Yes?
Yes.
Was that your understanding at the time?
Yes, it was.
Yes. Did you read the 2007 or the new 2015 regulations yourself?
I had had training on them. I don't remember reading the regulations per se.
You had training on them.
Yeah.
Did you have any training on the 2015 regulations?
I believe we did, yes.
Who delivered that training?
I don't remember, I'm afraid.
Was it done in-house at the TMO, or was it outsourced externally?
I believe it was in our building, but I don't know who delivered it.
When in 2015 did you have the training on the 2015 regulations?
I'm afraid I don't remember.
Right. Did you get any handouts or packs or anything like that that you
Yes.
could refer to afterwards if you had any doubt about what the new regulations meant?
Yes, I think that's what I would have had, would be a resume. And
Right.
so I think I referred earlier to the fact that there was, in the training, there was a review of the old regulations against the new regulations, so a comparison.
Right. Did you ever have any cause to look at the training pack or handout that you say you were given?
Yes, I would have looked at it.
Right. We've seen no documents. I'm told we've seen no documents about any training or any handouts.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
I haven't seen my training record from the TMO, so I don't know whether it would be documented there.
Right.
But it would have been something I would have had at my desk. It wouldn't have been something I would have put in the directory. It would have been for day-to-day use, so I would have had it on my desk.
Right, I see. Can we look at ART 406704, please? And can we have pages 2 and 3 of this email run up together? This is an email run from June 2015. And at the bottom of page 2, we can see an email from Janice Ray to you on the 12th of June 2015. And it goes over to page 3. And it will start with that one. And just to tell you the immediate context of this email, Miss Williams, it was Simon Lawrence's message at the end of May 2015 about financial savings on the crown detail reduction in height. Right?
Yes.
That's the background. And at the bottom of page 2, Janice Ray says to you, Claire, I have read the email and the details provided. Simon is correct that CDM does require us to ensure that future maintenance is considered during the scheme so that this is facilitated and can be done safely without foreseeable risk. Therefore, in the first instance, we need to ensure that we've considered what access we will require on an ongoing basis, for example, to install or replace windows for cleaning and or decoration purposes, adjustment to cladding, question mark, access to lighting, protection, aerials, etc. How do we propose to facilitate this? Believe up till now the glazing would have been replaced from within the flats, etc. Whilst the CDM regs have changed, I believe we would be looking to the project designers and CDMC who have been involved with project for clarification of how access for these various ongoing maintenance activities can safely be achieved. Happy to discuss once we have their assessment and proposals. You see that?
Yes.
So I've read that to you in full. Is this the first moment, June 2015, when you learnt that the CDM regulations had changed?
I don't remember.
Do you think that you were given training on the new regulations before or after the 12th of June 2015?
I don't remember.
Right. Can we then turn to the topic of the identity of the principal designer under the then new, CDM regulations 2015? Now, do you accept this proposition as a general matter from what you knew at the time, that under the 2015 regulations, if the TMO did not appoint a principal designer, then the TMO would have to fulfill the duties of a principal designer itself?
That is what I understood.
Yes. Can we then go to ART 405066? These are the minutes of October 2015 progress meeting you refer to in your September 2019 statement. And the meeting we can see was held on the 22nd of October 2015. Minutes are created by Artelia, and it's progress meeting number 16. You see that? And if we go to page, on page 1 we can see you were in attendance as the third person down the list. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And if we go to page 4, let's look together at item 3.2. And this is under the broader heading of section 3, contractors report and programme. And it says at 3.2, CDM, I'll read it all to you. F10 expires tomorrow. AM to ensure Paul Burrows provides the CDM handover promised to the TMO and provides advice in connection with renewal of the F10. The project team confirmed that the design is fundamentally complete. And then there's a post-meeting note, PMN. Under the 2015 regulations, if the PD appointment finishes before the end of the works, then the principal contractor takes on the PD role. This means the principal contractor puts together the health and safety file, or H&S file, for the client. And then in bold it says, for discussion at the next progress meeting. First, do you remember discussion of this nature at that meeting on the 22nd of October 2015?
Not specifically, but I can see what it's saying.
Okay, and we can see that AM is referred to, and in the action note as well. Do you remember who AM was?
That's Andrew Malcolm.
Yes, at Artelia. Now, if we go to, well, let me ask you before I leave this. the PMN, the post-meeting note, which sets out what the position was under the 2015 regulations. Do you know who said that or who provided that information?
I would think it would be Atelier.
Right. If you'd had the training that you say you'd had by this point, then was this something that you already knew? Namely, that if the PD appointment finishes before the end of the works, then the principal contractor takes on the PD role, and that means the principal contractor puts together the health and safety file for the client.
No, I didn't know that, but I think the training is based on the ideal project. It doesn't, with a start and a finish. Ours obviously went over a period when the role and the regulations changed. So no, the training I had wouldn't have explained how to deal with the situation we were in.
Right. In fact, is this statement correct, or was it correct, did you think, at the time?
I don't know. I don't remember seeing it in
Right.
all honesty.
Okay, let's move on then. Can we go to ART 405059, please? Because I'm interested in that post-meeting note. This is an email from you to Andrew Malcolm of Artelia of the 6th of November 2015, as we can see, copy to Neil Reed. And it says, Andrew, I've just had a meeting with Paul Burrows. In terms of the minutes, can you make sure you include, and then you can see a chunk of text, and I'll read it to you. The project team confirmed that the design is, quotes, fundamentally complete. Under the 2015 regulations, if the PD appointment finishes before the end of the works, then the principal contractor takes on the PD role. This means the principal contractor puts together the H&S file for the client. There is no legal requirement for a CDM advisor. Now, just pausing there, it looks from that as if you were the one proposing additions to the note, yes?
It looks to me like I was fed that information by Paul Burrows at that meeting. I have stated there probably what he told me.
Right. Well, let's look at Andrew Malcolm's reply at ART 405067 on the same day, 6th of November 2015. And he says, Hi, Claire. I can't put the latter red part of that in the minutes. Now, just pausing there and casting your eye down the page, if we can just scroll up, please, on page 1, you can see what's in red. And what's in red is, under the 2015 regulations, if the PD appointment finishes before the end of the works, then the principal contractor takes on the PD role. This means the principal contractor puts together the H&S file for the client. Going back to Andrew Malcolm's email at the top of the page, then, please, he says, I can't put the latter red part of that in the minutes. That is not an accurate account of the meeting. I will put it in as a PMN for discussion at the next meeting, and we can minute it at the next meeting. We did not agree that the contractor pulls together the file in the meeting. Now, it looks from that as if you were trying to get something minuted that wasn't even discussed, let alone agreed, at the 22nd of October 2015 meeting. Is that correct?
I was trying to make the situation clear to everybody, but I believe the paragraph or the information I put in there was what Paul Burrows had told me. So it was supposed to be informed information which would guide how we were dealing with the issue.
Well, that's not quite right, is it, Miss Williams? Your email to Andrew Malcolm on the 6th of November had asked him, can you make sure you include a chunk of text, and he wasn't prepared to put in the text which was not something which was discussed at the meeting itself. Isn't that right?
Yes, and his way of putting it in was appropriate, definitely.
Yes. I mean, you were trying to make a printed record of something which wasn't discussed at the meeting, weren't you?
I was trying to raise it as an issue, and as you say, it wasn't a minute, it was a note for information.
Well, with respect, again, that's not quite right. You weren't trying to raise it as a minute. You were trying to insert something into the minutes as a record of what was discussed at that meeting, which wasn't in fact discussed.
As I say, I think it's important that it was recorded what the role was, and it wasn't discussed at a meeting, so it isn't a meeting minute. I think to put it in as a note for information and discussion is the best way to deal with it.
Yes. And you didn't do that. You wanted him to include it in the minutes, not just put it in as a discussion note for later.
So I'm glad he corrected my approach and said, let's do it this way, because that was the right way to do it.
Right. Okay. We then move on to the question of the appointment of a principal designer. And I want to look at, first of all, when it was that you knew that one was needed. Can we go to ART 404399, please? This is, well, do you recognise this document, or at least this kind of document?
Yes.
You do. What is it?
It's the F10 telling the health and safety executive we're on site.
Yes. And this is the F10 Health and Safety Notification Form for the Grenfell Tower project. And you can see that it says date submitted 20th of July 2015. Do you see that on the right-hand side?
Yes.
Yeah. And then we can see the location of the site. It's an update to a previous submitted notification. We can see that it's Grenfell in Kensington and Chelsea, refurbishment, and then there's a description of the construction of the work. And then underneath that, it says about those involved in the project halfway down. You see that?
Yes.
And it says role, principal designer, name, Artelia, email, colinjames@Artelia. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did you see this form when it came?
Yes.
Can we then go to ART 409321, please? This is an email chain from July 2015. And can we go to start with, please, to the middle of page 3 in this email chain? This is an email from you to Neil Reed. Do you see that?
Yep.
It's dated the 20th of July 2015. You also sent it to Simon Lawrence, and you copied Colin James and Andrew Malcolm. And you say, whoops, here is the one I'm asking you to check against. Artelia are an unlikely designer. What were you referring to when you said Artelia are an unlikely designer? Exclamation mark.
I think what happened when I got the new F10, which was potentially a new format, I sent them the previous one to say this looks different and you're now down as a designer. So it was just highlighting the difference because they hadn't said to me there's a new format or anything. So I was just checking all was well.
Well, not quite, is that right? Because you're saying Artelia are an unlikely designer. What did you mean to impart by those words?
I think previously the designer on it had been Ryden.
Why did
So
you think
it didn't
Artelia...
look right.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Go on.
Right. Why did you think Artelia were an unlikely designer?
Because they hadn't been a designer throughout the rest of the project. And so they weren't the party I was expecting to see on it.
No. And does that tell us that you didn't expect Artelia to take on any type of role that involved design?
Yes.
Can we then go back to the email at ART 409321 at page 2 now? Where we see an email from Colin James of Artelia replying to you on the 21st of July 2015. It's at the very bottom of page 2 and goes over to page 3. So can we just start at the bottom of page 2, where everybody can see the email, and it starts, Hi Claire. That's all we get on page 2. Flip to page 3, and he says this, that the 2015 CDM regulations have replaced the CDM coordinator with principal designer, and the new F10 uses this title. Existing F10s will also change to the new format when they are revised, as is the case here. to the 6th of October 2015, the client must appoint a PD under the new regulations for all new projects and existing projects that extend beyond that date. Now, when you got this email, did you understand that if the project continued beyond the 6th of October 2015, then the TMO would have to appoint a principal designer?
Yes.
Yes. Did you ask anyone what the changes to the role would be?
I think, I don't know when my training came in, but I was trained probably around this time. So I don't think I asked anybody what the change to the role would be.
What did you understand that the change to the role would be?
I understood that the new principal designer took over the majority of the old CDMC role in terms of the pre-construction information they should be presenting and looking at the health and safety of the materials and the workers in the run-up to the project. And then the role of compiling the health and safety file, which is at the end of the project, would then be something the PD would take on.
A PD? Mm. So, to summarise your understanding at the time, you understood that the principal designer would take over the role occupied previously by the now abolished role of CDMC, yes?
Yes.
Certainly in relation to the pre-contractual responsibilities for design, and the health and safety file would also be put together by the principal designer.
Yeah, with help from the principal contractor. Yeah.
Well,
I thought the only difference was that they maybe oversaw health and safety issues during construction.
Can we go to ART 406731, please? This is the set of minutes of progress meeting number 15 of the 18th of September 2015, so a little bit earlier in the story. And we can see that you are the third attendee down on the list. You see that?
Yes.
And if we go to page 7, please, and turn to item 7.3, we now see CDM 2015 CW, that's you, I think, to appoint a principal designer from the TMO's new consultancy framework. So is it fair to say, just looking at this document, that at least from the 18th of September 2015, you knew that you had to appoint a principal designer?
Yes, I knew a principal designer needed to be appointed, yes.
Yeah. And was the plan, at least as minuted, to appoint one from the consultancy framework? That's what it says. What was the consultancy framework?
The TMO had completed, or were in the process of completing a framework tender looking for different types of consultants, which would be QSs, employers' agents, people doing principal designer work. It was looking at all the consultants we would need and going to tender to assess the services we could get.
Right. Was the compilation of the new consultancy framework completed by this point, 18th of September 2015?
I don't know.
Did you take any steps to identify anybody on the TMO's new consultancy framework who could act as a principal designer?
I believe I went to Bailey Garner, who were one of the consultants who... So I'm not quite sure what stage they're at. Presumably it was in place because it says new consultancy framework. So I went to Bailey Garner to ask if they could provide the role.
And what did they say?
I think they were reticent because they said it was preferable for a consultant who'd been involved with the scheme from inception.
Did you try anybody else in light of what they said?
I'd already, so I'm not sure of the timing of this, I'd obviously I think initially I thought the Atelier were going to take it on. They kept saying, oh, you need to appoint a principal designer, but they didn't say it can't be us. So initially I thought Atelier were going to take it on. And when they ultimately said no, they weren't going to do it, I'd gone to Ryden and to Studio E, and neither of those parties were able to take it on.
Well, you say, I think I initially thought that Atelier were going to take it on, but we've seen an email in the middle of July 2015, 20th of July 2015, from you, where you said that Atelier were an unlikely designer, and you told us that that was because you didn't expect Atelier to take on any role that involved design. So how can you explain why you thought that Atelier might take on the role of principal designer?
I'd understood from my briefing that many of the CDMCs also were able to offer a principal design service. So I almost assumed that they'd carry the service across.
That's not what you told us before, and it's not consistent, is it, with your whoops email of the 20th of July 2015?
The whoops email was in relation to which F10 I attached.
Yes, we've been through that.
Yeah.
And when I asked you about why it was that you said, or what you meant by saying that Atelier was an unlikely designer,
Yeah.
you told us it's because you understood that Atelier were not a designer and had not been involved in design aspects of the project.
Yes, but there was also the issue, the way I wasn't quite clear on the phrasing of it and the different format of the report, which is why I'd gone back to them and said, oh, you know, it doesn't look quite right. So that was their trigger for them to come back to me and say, oh, no, this is fine. But I think they came back and said, oh, you need to appoint a principal designer.
At any rate, or at any event, you talked to Bailey Garner. Was there anybody else on the new consultancy framework you approached to occupy the role of principal designer for this project?
I don't remember. I don't think so.
Can we then move forward a little bit in time to later in September 2015 and go please to ART 406502. This is your email to Neil Reed at the top of the page there on that date. See that?
Yes.
And you say, Neil, I understand the CDMC role has now been split between the client and principal designer. Are you retaining the principal designer role and just asking us to get a CDM compliance advisor? Who had told you that there was to be a split in the way you've identified it? Do you know?
No, I think so, because my understanding was most of the CDMC role would become, so I spelled principal wrong, become the principal designer, apart from the client who obviously had to appoint the CDMC and then at the end have the health and safety file in place. So no, I don't know.
Right. When you said, are you or asked, why are, sorry, I'll start that again. When you asked the question, are you retaining the principal designer role, that question there,
Yes.
why were you asking it, given that you already knew or thought that Atelier were an unlikely designer, to use your expression?
Yeah, no, the whoops email was asking them just to clarify, were they a designer? I didn't think they've done any design, but there was also the fact that they hadn't said they weren't going to be doing it. So I'm just here trying to understand what they're doing and what they're not doing.
What did you intend to mean by the principal designer role in that question?
I'm asking them if they are actually taking it on, because they'd said to me many times that, or several times, you would need to appoint a principal designer.
Let me be more precise. When you ask the question, are you retaining the principal designer role, what function did you think Atelier had before, which they were going to retain?
They weren't a designer previously on the scheme, but I didn't know whether their CDMC had the skills to do this.
To do what?
To become principal designer.
I see. So when you ask the question, are you retaining the principal designer role, just so I'm clear about what you're telling us, did you mean to ask the question, are you going to continue to perform the functions previously attributable to your role as CDMC?
Yes, yes. Thank you for paraphrasing.
I
Yes.
see. And you use the expression principal designer role. Does that tell us that, as far as you understood it, the role of principal designer included the role previously occupied by the CDMC?
Yes, the majority of the role at the stage we were at was what the CDMC had done.
Right. Now, I think you say that that Artelia refused to take on the role of principal designer because their insurance wouldn't cover it.
Yes.
Now, Simon Cash has told us that nobody at Artelia said that. I just wonder, where do you think you got that impression from?
I don't know whether somebody had told me, because I know I'd put it in an email, so it would have been about the time of the email.
Can we go to ART 406195, please? This is an email from Simon Cash internally at Artelia. Later the same day, the 25th of September 2015, which is the same day as the email we've just been looking at, where you asked the question, are you retaining the principal designer role, do you see? And what he records here in his message to Paul Burrows and Neil Reed, and copied to Andrew Malcolm, is this. Neil, Paul, I've just had a conversation with Claire to try and clarify what has been going backwards and forwards in terms of what the TMO need to do, as this seemed different to what Bailey Garner was saying to her. What I've said is, the current role of the CDM coordinator ceases to exist as of 5th of October. The TMO must appoint a principal designer. Bailey Garner are not prepared to take on the role, as they say the PD should be involved with the project from inception, and as they have not been so, they cannot take on the role. My response is that this situation is not common to this project, and many organisations are being engaged due to the transition of roles who have not been involved with projects since inception, such as the way of the legislation. However, for this project, her first port of call should be Ryden, as they are the D&B, design and build, contractor, and as such manage the design process and are responsible for the design. If Ryden are not prepared to take the P&D role on, then the next option is to ask if Studio E would take on the role through Ryden. The CDM compliance advisor role is not a project-specific role, but rather a client-side role, and one that we can fulfill, advising clients of their obligation under the new regulations and ensuring that their project managers, PDs and PCs, so principal designers and principal contractors, are all doing what they should be under the new regulations, similar to the role we were offering to Lambeth. Claire is now much clearer as to what she's supposed to be doing, and hopefully will now be able to sort things out. Now, the first question here is, do you recall the conversation with Simon Cash on that day that he's recording here?
I know I spoke to Simon Cash about this. I don't remember when it was, but I did speak to him, yes.
Right. Is this, so far as you can recall, an accurate record of what he said to you?
Yes, it looks though those are the items we would have discussed.
Right. Did you tell him what Bailey Garner had told you?
Yes.
I see. Now, Simon Cash reports here that he advised you that it didn't matter that a contractor was not involved with the project from the beginning. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember it, but he's recorded it, so I believe he would have told me.
Right. At that stage, who did you think was right, Bailey Garner or Artelia?
I think I was being pulled in different directions, but I would be expecting Artelia as our consultant we've been working with to give us proper advice.
I see. Did you ask Ryden whether they would take on the role of principal designer?
I did.
And they refused, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ask Studio E?
I asked them via Ryden. I hadn't spoken to Studio E in person for a long time.
And what was the response?
They said that Studio E said they weren't able to take it on either.
Right. Mr. Chairman, we are, I'm afraid, rather in the middle of this topic, but this is probably a convenient moment as we're about to go to a different document and move the story on.
Oh, very well, yes. Well, we'll stop there then. Time we all had a break for some lunch, Ms. Williams. We'll resume at 2 o'clock, please. And no talking to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it over the break, please. All right? Thank you very much. Good. 2 o'clock then, please. Thank you.